Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about strikes. What do you do with this weapon that you're learning to use? So again, you want to start with your grip. Right hand is up, left hand is down. We talked earlier about coming to attention. We're going to bow, kunye, hilsung. Then we're going to come back underneath, come around to our shoulder. We're going to bend over and come up with our elbow, reach across our eyes, step out, come across, and now we're in a ready position. So a bow is basically a stick. But when you hold it in this manner and utilize it as an extension of your arm, you have to be aware that you now have better reach and you have more leverage. A couple things about striking with a bow in the traditional manner that you're going to have to get used to is that you need to control the heel of the bow. So you're always going to be focused on what you're doing with the tip of the bow, where you're hitting, whether you're lunging or thrusting. But the heel of the bow is just as important. So real quick, I'm just going to show you a strike, and I want you to see what I mean. So let's say I'm going to step forward, and I'm going to strike at the neck of my opponent. Now let's say I miss. I don't want the heel of the bow to come around and smack me or hit me in the neck. So I want to control the heel of the bow. And you'll notice it's hitting my shoulder. And I want you to be aware of the fact that proper use of a bow is going to mean that the heel is going to hit your arm, typically between your elbow and your shoulder. Yes, it stings. Yes, you may get some bruises, but the more you practice, the less that will bother you. And you don't have to start off, with real forceful strikes. You can take your time and learn to do the strike without really bruising yourself with a bat. So I want you to be aware of that. Don't just focus on where the tip or the heel of the bow is, but pay attention to both ends and what their functionality is. So if I go back to a ready stance, there's a couple of strikes I want to show you, and I'm going to do one first from the right front stance, and then I'm going to step forward, do the same strike from a left front stance, just to kind of give you an idea of what they look like. So the first one is a head and neck strike. So I'm going to come straight down and strike. I'm looking for the side of the head, the temple, maybe even the clavicle. It depends on what's open on my opponent. Notice I'm not letting go of the bow when I do that strike. I'm just directing the tip of the bow towards my target, and the heel is still outside my arm. So I don't want to do a strike to where I'm hitting myself someplace that I need. And so this will become more obvious with this neck strike. So if I wanted to strike the side of the neck, I would come around, focusing on my target, and strike at the side of the neck. Now just like in open-handed martial arts, we don't just stop when we make contact. I want you to follow through. So your hips are part of this. Notice I'm hitting myself in the arm again, and that's okay, because I don't want, again, to hit myself someplace that's vulnerable. I'm going to strike at the neck again. Now, when I come down to hit the ribs of my opponent, it may become more obvious why I don't want to catch the bow on the inside of my arm. So as I step forward and strike towards their rib cage, if I had this bow inside of my body, it would hit the same area that I'm trying to target on my opponent, and I don't want to hit myself there. I don't want all of the force, if I was to miss, to hit me in the ribs. That's why I'm using my arm. It's a little easier to see when you're hitting the center of your arm than if you're hitting the top of the bottom. So that's why I wanted to point it out with this strike. But there's a rib strike. Again, here, you have to look forward, look at your opponent, and make sure that you know where the end of your bow is going. Then, of course, there's always a knee strike. So we're going to strike down at the knees. It should be the same height as your knee. Notice I'm not stopping here. I'm going all the way through. Make sure you strike through, all the way through your target. So the idea, no matter which strike you're doing, is that you are going through your target. So you want to twist your body. There's also a thrust, and we can use the thrust in a lot of different places. I'm going to step forward, and I'm going to thrust my bow forward. Now I can thrust to the face. Typically, if you're going to thrust to the face, you want to focus right below the nose and above the lips. So this little area right here is a great place if you're going to thrust in someone's face. You can also thrust for their neck. You can try to hit the middle of their chest, but that's not nearly as effective as going for their solar plexus, which is just focus the same height as yours. Of course, you can always go for the groin. And then another popular one, if your opponent is very skilled or they have a dangerous feet, they like to kick a lot, you can also go to the top of their foot, which definitely will slow that down. But the idea is the strike is very similar to your other strikes, but you're going to load up and then come forward. So it doesn't really affect your basic technique. You notice as I come forward, the bow is outside of my arm and I'm thrusting this way. Later we'll learn some other thrusts that are a little bit more forward weight controlled that give you more force. But for right now, we're going to stop right there.